Hi everyone, welcome to episode 56 of the Startup Playbook Podcast. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they use to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. My guest for this podcast episode is Vicky Lay. At just 22, Vicky quit her degree and co-founded Zookle.com, a Silicon Valley venture-backed e-learning and textbook rental company that turned over $20 million in revenue last year. As a Chief Operations Officer, Vicky successfully scaled a business 10x year on year. She is now the Managing Director at Artesian Venture Partners, an early-stage venture capital business with offices in Australia, Singapore, Shanghai, New York, and London. In her role at Artesian, she's actively building startup ecosystems across Australia and ASEAN, decoding the DNA of entrepreneurial success and helping more entrepreneurs secure funding. She also founded and serves on the boards of non-profit organisations fostering youth empowerment and entrepreneurship, including Young Achievement Australia and JA Australia. Vicki Leigh was also recognised as Forbes 30 Under 30 recipient in April 2017. In this live podcast, we spoke about how to hire and retain the right talent, Vicky's learnings from being on both sides of the table, what she looks for in early-stage startups as an investor, and empowering diversity in the startup ecosystem. Without further ado, here is my interview with Vicky Lay. Hi Vicky, welcome to the Startup Playbook Podcast, and thanks for joining us on this cold and windy night in Melbourne.
My pleasure.
So for those people who are here in the crowd today or listening at home who may not be as familiar with you or your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Okay, long-winded answer. I'll try to shorten it. So Vicky Lay, I would say I'm a founder by training, by trade. I started my first business at 22 in EdTech out of university, so dropped out, did the classic, don't want to do school anymore, want to start a business. I had been managing family, very small family businesses for as long as I can remember. Always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but had no idea about tech. I never knew that you could use someone else's money, spend it and not pay it back. That was great. So figured that out early on, which was good. And then did that for 3 years. I was a COO and did that from nothing. So we scaled 10x year on year, which was really exciting and a lot to take in as a 22-year-old. Then moved on to the board, so into an advisory position, moved out of day-to-day operations and got headhunted into venture capital. So no investing background, not a normal investment banker or anything like that. But the managing partner of the firm was actually my seed stage investor. So wanted me to come across and pretty much crafted a role out for me. Never thought I would work for someone, to be honest. I always thought I was going to go do actually my next thing. But it's been really interesting doing the other side of the table and learning about, what they actually talk about in investment communities when we're not around, and just being able to translate that back and give it to entrepreneurs in a format that they can understand or they can use has been really helpful. When I actually really fell in love with mentoring and working with founders and helping them grow. Now at Artesian, I help to manage the portfolio in Australia. We have 115 companies that we've invested into. It's growing very quickly. We want to invest into about 500 over a 5-year period. I also run the ASEAN business, so I am creating 6 funds across Southeast Asia. I don't want to say it's impact, but most of the companies that we're investing into are actually actively contributing to the communities, which is really great to see. And I also, I also do a lot of things on the side. So I started a not-for-profit, actually 2 not-for-profits in youth entrepreneurship, Young Achievement Australia and Junior Achievement Australia, which is all about, fostering youth empowerment and getting people to stand up and create businesses and learn to fail forward in a safe environment. So everything I've ever done is all in the entrepreneurship, human potential space.
Sure. Going back, so you mentioned your first kind of jump into the startup space was while you were at uni and you decided that wasn't for you and that you wanted to jump in. What was that like, and how did you sort of come to that conclusion?
I want to have like that fantasy story where it's like, I'm like Steve Jobs and I dropped out. It's not like that at all. I was just a really bad student. I was like one of those like I started in like a management major and I was like, I'm going to do economics. Oh, actually, you know what? I want to do finance now. Oh, actually, now I'm going to change to marketing. Maybe I don't even want to do business. So I was one of those just jumping around across all these different majors. Didn't know what I was doing. I spent a year overseas. I did an exchange program in China. Just partied and spoke Mandarin really poorly to everybody there. Came back and was like, okay, I want to start a business now. Was not planned. The only reason why I fell into it was because I met my co-founder in first year business strategy 101 class, and fast forward 4 years, we were always catching up and just talking about crazy ideas. And he spoke to me about this idea of textbook rental, which is buying the inventory and renting it out. And I was, as a student, a poor student who had just come back from exchange, I really understood that pain point, and it's important as an entrepreneur to solve things that are close to you. And I wanted to democratize education through making resources cheaper. So that was that's how I kind of broke into the space. And I was actually on the fence for ages. So I was like, I don't know about this VC, using someone's money whenever someone comes and finds me, lost everything. And I was on the fence for a while. And what flipped me was that friend gave me a book called The Startup Review. So I'm not sure if it's written by Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn. And I was reading it on a plane to Melbourne, actually, oddly. And that was the book that I was like, oh my God, I need to do this VC thing. I need to go out and start a business. And then I went all in. Yeah. And then I dropped out because I kept failing my subjects because my target market is students. And therefore, every semester I was not there for exams and not there during the beginning because that was my peak period. So it was just by default.
Yeah, so I actually met Ahmed about 4 years ago.
Yeah, really great guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. So that was, I think, at the very early stages of when I was trying to launch Stage Label back in the day. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that he kind of touched on was, I think this was just after you'd sort of closed funding from Silicon Valley.
Yes.
And one of the things that we were chatting about was how difficult he found it to raise investment locally compared to the experience that he had when he went to the Valley. Yeah. So can you kind of share a little bit about what that was like for you guys back in the day in trying to raise investment, being sort of student startup founders?
Not good. It was tough. I guess it's because it was a very different ecosystem back there. So if I draw you a landscape of Australia and what's happened in VC, so about 10 years ago, I don't know if you know, but venture capital as an industry had always had negative returns. Okay, and that's because government was they were putting money into the top of the funnel, so they were trying to invest into late stage businesses that just did not exist. And if you look at it as a pyramid, the base, there were not enough startups being created or being seeded at the bottom. So what we found was that because there was a negative returns as an industry, not a lot of money was there weren't a lot of investors, and if there were investors, they were really risk averse, and they were trying to ask us for half the valuation that we were. So that was quite difficult. We didn't have co-working spaces and these beautiful incubators and accelerator programs. When I did my business meetings, I was at Nando's. Like that was my office for a while. It was Nando's at Ultimo next to University of Technology City. They didn't even have a space for me to do meetings. So it was just a very different landscape. Today it's massively developed. So I think we're really quite lucky as an ecosystem now, especially when you're comparing it to Southeast Asia, where I've just been.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was that initial kind of phase for you like? Obviously, the ecosystem's developed a lot, and as you mentioned, there's a lot more support out there with co-working spaces and just more people in the space in general. But at that time when, again, you had this crazy idea with Ahmed, what were those first few days, weeks, months like in trying to turn that concept into a business?
I'm just going to be completely transparent. So I don't want anyone to think that I was there from the very beginning. So I wasn't there when the idea was born.
Right.
So what happened was there was a co-founding team, and as you have found a breakup, everyone left, and there was one person who was Ahmed, sitting with a lot of debt and no revenue. And he pitched me, when I came back from China, we were chatting, he was like, dude, what's going on? Like, I'm going to shut down this business, and I'm in all this debt, and da-da-da-da. And I was like, he told me the idea and the vision, and if you know Ahmed, I was like, oh my God, you're in all this debt. I love it. I love this business. So I chucked in all of my savings, which was not a lot at the time, but it was about 13,000, which was pretty good for a student. And I chucked everything in. That's the money that we used. We used that to buy the tickets to Silicon Valley, and that's the money that then raised the capital that brought us back to Australia to roll out our model. We had a new co-founding team of 4 people. So everyone was new except Ahmed. And then we built the business from scratch. So I wasn't there for the initial idea. It was more that I'm a big why person. So I never do anything unless I'm absolutely in love with the purpose or the meaning. And for me, I fell in love with the idea of democratizing education and helping to get resources out. We started in textbooks, but that was like it was always just a shrinking island for us. It was just a way to get our foot in the door with students. and actually roll out a digital hub. So now we're across Southeast Asia. We're all about digital learning. We have P2P platforms, we have video tutorials, we have notes sharing, stuff like that. So it's about this ecosystem of learning and trying to reduce the cost.
Sure. So I guess fast forwarding from Ahmed kind of pulling that team together then and then rolling that out from a time when that potentially wasn't quite working out.
Yes.
How did that sort of grow? So you mentioned earlier that the Zookle was growing 10x year on year.
Yes.
What was that sort of process like in terms of managing and sustaining that growth over a period of time?
It was like really exciting and really scary at the same time, because there's nothing as like the feeling that you get when you're looking at your dash and you're like, oh my god, we just hit $1 million in revenue. Like shit, we just did that in 6 weeks. Like amazing feeling. But when you have to then fulfill those orders or do the customer service on the back of that without the operational systems to scale with you, oh my god, I aged like 10 years in that 6-week period, because we had no, we were staying up every night till 3 a.m. trying to fulfill these books. All of us were like, we had bags and realized, and we were like trying to scan these books into the system and trying to find out, trying to get these books to the customers. And that semester was our best revenue, but also our worst customer service. So it was like this bittersweet relationship of balancing between hyper growth and making sure you have the systems to scale. We obviously now are completely fine, no issues, but the growing pains of trying to push through that was a big learning curve for me. Coming from, I guess for me, life has always been pretty easy. I came from a migrant family, so we've always been quite hardworking. So I was always kind of like an overachiever. I always did things, and I was used to sort of getting rewarded or getting what I put in. But when you're in that environment where you're just faced with challenges, they say being an entrepreneur is kind of staring into the abyss of the unknown, eating glass. I've taken that from Elon Musk, right? And that's exactly how it was. I was constantly just thinking, oh my god, are we going to die? Is that is death just around the corner? And having to face that every day, it's just a massive character building exercise. I definitely would never take back what I went through.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when people are starting a startup, there's almost two different things. So there's one that you're trying to push everything uphill and you're trying to acquire your next customer, and that's always the uphill struggle. Then there's that part when something just hits and things just grow really quickly and far exceed what you sort of want, and you essentially then it's that other side. So being on that other side where you're generating $1 million in revenue and you've got to fulfill all these orders. What are some of the things that people being on the other side may not realize are some of the bigger challenges that come as part of that? And how do you overcome that?
I think the biggest challenge, I think everyone has a different story. So for me, because I was a CEO, I was in operations, I think the biggest lesson that I learned coming through that, 10x scale, trying to grow, was learning to see the forest through the trees. So what I find with founders, and even now in our portfolio in the companies that I mentor, is that the founders are so entrenched in the business, and it's hard because they've got customer service flying at them, they've got operations, they're like, I've got to grow, I've got to raise money, I've got to manage these people, oh my god, this staff just left. You're just being bombarded from all these different angles, and it's so hard to step back and say, no, what is actually the highest priority item? What is the forest through the trees? How can I actually make sure I'm adding the most value in what I'm doing every day and making that conscious choice? That was a lesson that I had to learn, is how do you really understand priority. And I met Sarah Lacey, who runs Pando Daily, which is the biggest startup media in Silicon Valley, and she gave me some interesting advice. I think she actually stopped from Reid Hoffman as well, but what she said to me was that she's like, Vicky, doing a startup is like going into a room that's completely messy, right? The chairs are turned over, there's paint on the wall, everything's everywhere, and you're just there as a founder going, oh my god, I have to clean this whole room tomorrow. And what people don't realize is that no one is expecting you to do that. Your job is not to clean the entire room, because that's impossible, because there's always going to be something for you to clean. What you need to do is to learn what to clean and when, and that is the key difference. I think that's something that founders often neglect, just because they're always heads down, bums up.
Sure. And I know one of the things that we were kind of talking about before we turned on the mic as well was the importance of team. And so again, we sort of touched on this with having the right sort of team once you'd raised capital and brought the right team on. But as you're continuing to grow and scale and you're doing this 10x year on year, obviously the needs of the business change and you have to bring on the right people. What is it that you sort of look for? What's the process that you sort of go through when you're looking to bring on people?
That's a great question. I love people. I love talent. Like I love, even now in my current role, I've just recruited like 5 people in the last like 2 months. Not even kidding. But I guess for me, what I don't care about hard skills. So I'm not, I think those can be learnt, right? And you can teach someone that. What you can't teach someone is the core. It's the essence of who they are. They're either a self-starter or they're not. Okay, they're either going to be someone who can solve problems or someone who's going to come and bug you with questions all the time because they're not able to just problem solve, right? And I think that's something that I look for. I'm looking for this essence in somebody, and you also have to look at the role that you're hiring for. There's a very like someone who's going to come in and who I'm trying to groom to become a manager or to replace myself is a very different person to someone who I just want to come in to do my accounting function. Who it's very structured. It's repetitive. It's a very different type of hire. So I guess as a founder, what you need to think about is it's not just about getting people on the bus with you. Like that's just like the first. People are like, oh, okay, let's get on the bus and let's just drive to the It's not about that. It's about making sure everybody knows where you're going and then making sure people are in the right seats. So people often blame their team. They go, oh, we didn't hit this because this person didn't do this. If you're a manager, it's your fault. Take responsibility, take full ownership, because if someone's not performing your team, you've either hired the wrong person or you're not managing them properly. You've got to make sure they're in the right seat for their motivations and also their skill set.
Do you have any sort of processes that you follow, or is that more kind of intuitive in terms of knowing what the right person, how to not only hire the right people, but also place them in the right sort of position?
Okay, I'm a gut feel person. I can usually tell, and this is because I've done so much hiring that when I meet someone, I meet people like everywhere. I'm always hiring, no matter where I am, because I always have so many things on the go. I'm always thinking, when I meet someone I like them, I'm like, I'm going to work with you one day. It might not be now, it might be in like 10 years time, but I'm definitely going to work with you. So I'm constantly recruiting. So I think you have to do that first of all. Another thing I do is I try to understand their motivations, and I'm constantly talking to them, and that's very proactive. So I really, my first question in interviews is always like, what do you want to be in 10 years, man? How do I get you to where you want to be in 10 years for the vehicle that we have now? And if you can marry that together, that's how you really retain people. And you got to treat your people well. Like I'm very, I've been treated badly in the past, right? I've been treated by bad managers, and it just makes me resent the culture. And I just perform, I do everything half-assed. And I think you need to remember that your team, they're people and they have their own things that they want to achieve, and you need to respect that and take your people with you as you grow, right? And give them all the kudos, because you don't need it. You're a manager, you're a boss, you're running the business. You don't need any of that. Give it to them so that they have the opportunity to shine and to feel recognized. And I think if you do that enough in your career, I think people will follow you anywhere that you go. And I've felt that. So people have gone with me to multiple things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you kind of touched upon as well is just managers taking ownership of it as well. So it's not just about, why aren't Gen X's like sticking around and retaining? That's their problem. It's more, how do I create a culture, or how do I, understand that I'm giving them what they need to make sure that they're happy, in the current role, or kind of following me along to the next thing as well.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone's different. Everybody has their own thing. Like for me personally, I need flexibility. I hate saying you need to be here at 9 to leave. I'm like, screw you, man. I'm like, I work on the weekends. Don't tell me where. I'm like typical Gen X, right, or Gen Y, or whatever it is. But I'm like typical of that, and I think like it's very different to how you would manage someone who's a little bit older, because they might value something different. Yeah. So I think it's just understanding the person and what they need, and just caring. They're not a resource; they're a person. So just care about them as a person, and they will pay you back tenfold in your business, and you all perform better for it. So I think that's the key message: is that treat people like people, not resources.
Absolutely. So on that note, you decided to kind of move on from Zookle, and you ended up, as you mentioned, your seed investor in the business ended up sort of hiring you.
Yeah, and he called me and said, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to London to check out the tech center. He's like, no, you're not. Come here. We're going to have a meeting. And then he's like, you're not going. He's like, you think about VC, and that's how I fell into it.
Yeah, what was that process like? Again, was it a difficult decision for you? Obviously, being not right there from the start, but obviously from a very early stage of that company, and obviously seeing that grow really quickly. Was that a difficult decision for you to not just give that up, but like move on and do something else?
Massive. It took me a year to actually come to terms. I think like I went through this phase where I was like I just kept telling everyone, oh, I was looking for my next challenge. Like that was my answer to everybody. And I think the truth of the matter was that I was growing, and I had stopped learning at the pace that I needed to expand, and it was making me underperform. And I'll be honest, I went through like a quarter life existential crisis, right? It was hilarious. My family was like, okay, they were just giving me so much shit. But so I went through that phase, and I recognized it, and I spoke to my co-founders, and I did not leave until I completely replaced. That's one thing I do believe in. I believe in finishing off and tying up everything. I don't want anyone to be, at a disadvantage. So what I did was, we acquired another business, and only when we acquired someone, and the founder who was of that business was actually a better COO than I ever was, just because he loved books and like barcodes and like all that stuff, ISBNs, dear God. And he just loved it so much, and he was so passionate. And when I saw that, and I saw that he was actually better, that I was like, you know what? Now is the time I can actually go. So it took me like 6 months to extricate myself out of the business and actually replace myself completely. But the decision to go was not hard, because I knew that I had to go, but I guess the hard thing was letting go of the labels, because I had, for like 3.5 years, I was like, I was doing talks, I was like, I'm COO, Vicky, I'm the founder, I'm the female founder in an all-male team, and that was my identity. And having to let that go and come out and say, oh my God, who I'm just Vicky, shit. Oh my God. That was a massive ego knock for me, which was really good for where I was, just because I was like an overachiever. I was like, I'm so great, all that crap. And then that was like, but like that really helped to just ground me and like figure out what's really important to me, and making sure I was always on purpose and really focused on my why. And so now when I do things, my decision's always like, okay, is this going to make me grow the most? Is it the scariest thing I can give myself to develop as a person? And is it really fulfilling my why, which is uncapping human potential, in the biggest way that I can right now? So that's Artesian for me right now.
Sure. That whole kind of self-identification thing, like that comes in many forms. I had that when we decided to shut down Stage Label, which is what we were sort of going through, and like everyone associates you, especially like a startup is such a big part of who you are as a person. Yeah. And then when that like sort of
weekend, everything.
Absolutely. And then people associate you with that as well. And it's just like when that goes away, someone described it as a really bad breakup that just kind of just stays there, and people keep asking you about it.
I know. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I mean, in terms of your next role, what's in terms of your current role with
but
that.
But in saying that though, I'm still involved. So I'm on the board of advisors, and I still I help to raise like the most recent round through Artesian and equity crowdfunding. So I think in a weird way, even though it took me a long time to make the decision and come to my own terms, I actually think it was a better thing for the business that I was replaced by a stronger COO, and me in an advisory role now is much. I actually think it's like hard to say, but I have to admit, I think the business did better once I actually made that move, which is great because I'm still a shareholder, but but I think it's important to make that choice. Don't get stuck in I'm the founder, therefore I have to be there forever. Like that's not true. The first people who in the first 7 years sometimes aren't the people who are going to take it to the next level, and you've got to be very real about that.
Absolutely. So in terms of your current role with Artesian, and sort of you mentioning that something that you were looking for was the rate of learning that you were going through. What are some of the things that you've kind of taken out of your role with Artesian so far?
I think I was just always so emotional. Like I was so emotionally invested in things that I do, and I think sitting on the investor side, I've learned to look at things objectively, and that's really helped me as a business person. Because when I started to sit in investment committees and to have to think about those decision processes, not from the point of, wow, I love that founder, oh my God, I want to really help them, let's give them money. It's like, actually, do we think there's a good market for this? What's the opportunity? Do we think that they're the right team to execute? Is it scalable? How does this fit into the broader competitive landscape? All of those things really helped me, once again, hone that skill of seeing the forest for the trees and stepping back and looking at it as a whole. So I think being a CEO and being heads down, bums up, being an investor, you're not that at all. You're at the board level. You're very peripheral vision, looking at it from a very high level. And I think that's the key lesson, I've had to continually learn, and even through my time now, I think that's the value that I can bring to a company that I work with.
Sure. Is there anything that you've learned specifically from the investor side that you wish you'd known when you were a founder with Zoopal?
Yeah, I wrote this article about the pitch deck that I wish I had, like the template that I wish I had before I did it. And it's like 10 slides.
Yeah.
I know exactly what investors want. I know exactly how you sell it now. I kind of wish I knew that, or I wish there was some resource out there that I could have had back then. Now it's a lot more documented, I think, but trying to raise money when you don't understand and investors, they're really quiet too, so you'll pitch and they'll be like they're staring at you and they don't say anything and they just go, thank you very much for your time. You're like, is it good or is it bad? And they don't respond. Like, I think not having the feedback was like, you just had to do it so many times that you just learned by yourself, or you would speak to other founders. So that's something that I really understanding what an investor wants and how to pitch it to them. I think that's been really valuable in my current role.
Sure.
Yeah.
So on that, what is it that you as an investor look for in startups?
Easy. Okay, blood on the wall problem. I want something that I need to know that the founder has a tie to it. Why are they uniquely placed to solve this problem? Has it been a pain point for them? The solution, yeah. I don't know. Like, I think because I invest into early stage, I know people pivot and that the solution kind of changes. So I'm not too married about it in the early stage. Later stage, yes, that changes. Your market opportunity, people don't really understand that that's a dollar sign. That's a number. Don't come in with market opportunity like, oh, there's this many people. That's great. What's the value of that in terms of money in the pocket? So I need a number and a market size. The bigger, the better. Multiple geographies if you can. So the market opportunity, I'm looking for a business model that makes sense, right? There's only so many business models out there, so make sure you understand how you're going to make money, get your unit economics right. I often run some quick numbers and I can usually tell if someone doesn't know what they're doing just by their business model slide. And I think with the business model as well, some people they get, because in the beginning, when someone's first starting out, they don't actually know which business model is going to work. And that's fine. You might be like, oh, maybe I'm a subscription, or maybe I'm it's an e-commerce thing, possibly, or I'm consulting as well on the side. I get that. Choose your main one. Otherwise, you look defocused. And then if you pivot later, we don't care. That's fine. So business model, team, very, very important. Make sure you sell yourselves. Like you need to show me that you're the team to execute, and why are you that person? Like, why are you over the other 10 pitches that I saw last week that are doing the same thing as you, by the way? Why you? So that's really important there. And I think also having all the other things that you need. So I want to see your financials in the deck. I want to see your traction. Traction is really important, especially in the Australian market, less so in the US and overseas. But for some reason, Australian investors are very big on like, what's your traction? What's your revenue? What's your users? That's a big one here. And also your offer. So make sure your offer is really clear. Look, I understand some people that don't know their valuation, or they don't want to like peg something in the ground and say, this is my flag, this is what I'm worth. But I think at least having a ballpark figure, don't come in there and be like, oh, I don't know. What do you think? I'll take whatever I can get. It makes you look really desperate. So just try to have a number in place before you come in there. And have an appendix slide that answers all the questions that you know I'm going to ask because you've spoke to other investors. It just makes you look really smart. And I'm like, wow, he's really switched on. He's really thought about the business. She really knows what she's doing. She's a girl with a plan. Like that's kind of what I look for. And those are all the things I wish I knew when I was pitching investors. But yes.
Sure. In terms of like early stage investing, is there ever a stage that's too early for you? Like what's the right time for a startup to come and approach an early stage investor?
I think what you need to understand about investors is that they have different mandates and they have different investment styles. Okay, so you have the traditional stock picking one, which is, they'll pick the 5 or 10, whatever, and they'll place their bets and want them to grow. Like that's, they usually are working on numbers like traction, all those things, trying to figure out, they probably do a lot on team and all the soft stuff. So there's not really any time that's too early. Like we pitched on air. We didn't have a website and we raised capital. So there's no too early. What you have to understand about being too early is how much you want to give up. Obviously, if you're pre-revenue, pre-traction, you're going to lose a lot more of your company. Whereas if you wait, your valuation will be higher. You can retain more of the business. It's better for you long term. So that's one thing. The other side of investing is like a more diversified style. That's Artesian. That's what we are. We are institutional approach to de-risking early stage startup pipeline. So other investors might pick 10. We have 115. in our portfolio. So it's very much about diversification. For us, it's very cookie cutter with the way we invest. We have particular partners that we work with, Slingshot, Chile, Sydney Angel, all that stuff, and we're looking for a stage. We don't mind too much about the metrics at that first ticket because we're just seeding the ecosystem. We understand that you have to grow and participate early and back founders early so they can then give you the deals later on. So we believe in growing with founders. So too early, not too early, I think it just depends on the investor mandate, like what their fund requires, and also what you as a founder are looking to do in terms of cutting up your equity pie.
Sure. And obviously there's no kind of every situation is different. There's no right or wrong sort of approach to this, but what amount of equity should a very early stage startup be looking to give up?
People always want me to give a number. Generally, it's between 15 and 25%.
Yeah.
Right? That's the general VC kind of thing. But I can tell you, in early seed sort of investing, we don't take more than like 5 to 10% of the business that we take. Like, and that's because we see, like, if you take 25 or 30%, like I was in Asia, not naming any names, but there were some investors taking like 40% of a company at the seed stage. So when you get to B, your founders are like on like 5%. How are they incentivized to grow the business any further? So I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I like the fact that our model and our fund is very much about incentivizing the startups early, and we take 5 to 10 is probably the most we've ever taken in Australia for the seed stage.
Yeah.
Like that's like pre-seed, yeah.
I don't think that's something that a lot of startups consider as well, is what do the subsequent rounds look like if you're giving up a whole heap of equity. Like I've heard of situations where founders have raised an amount of seed capital here and then gone to the US looking for their Series A, and they just can't raise because the terms aren't appealing to them. It's not that they're not interested in the business, it's just that as an investment deal it isn't quite right in terms of what they're looking for. So exactly.
And like I have companies in my portfolio that they did bad deals, like not us, but like other investors or whatever, which is fine. Like we let them make their own choices. But when they've gone to then raise their further rounds, the other investors are like, I'll only invest into you if you get an increase in your ESOP and you get more. And they're like, okay, bad deal. Like it's because people want you to be incentivized. They want to know that their equity is being taken care of and that you have an incentive to grow the business and the company. And that's really important to remember. Also be careful with the type of shares that you're giving out, right? So try to get ordinary if you can. Be careful about liquidation rights and preference and all that stuff in your first round. I would be weary about that investor because they obviously either don't know what they're doing or they're a shark. Okay, so just be careful.
Absolutely. And again, one of the other things that we were kind of talking about was you're heading up to the Philippines later this month.
I am going to the Forbes conference.
Yeah. Yes. And obviously you do a lot sort of, you mentioned you're trying to grow 6 funds in the ASEAN region as well.
Simultaneously.
Yeah. What does, what do the sort of different ecosystems, or what are you kind of seeing from other startups around the general area, and how does that compare to what's happening here locally?
Okay, so the main thing I'm seeing between Australia and ASEAN, I'm guessing that's the question?
Yeah.
Australian founders are more, they're better quality, okay? Because they obviously have, the ecosystem's been around for much longer, there's a lot more exposure, they understand how to like package a product or package a business and then sell it to an investor. That's not the case in ASEAN because it's so brand new for them in Southeast Asia. Most of them are like some founders, like they've come from a farm and they're like, hey, look what I built this thing on the side to help me feed the fish when I'm not there. And it's amazing, the technology, but they have no idea how to package it in the right way. So I think there's definitely that, not so much that the founder quality is lower, it's just that there's a lack of education. So I think that is a big thing, that there's a big gap there. They have massive market potential, whereas we don't, right? So we're 24 million. Indonesia alone is like 250 million, right? You give you an idea of the size. So they're sitting on this massive goldmine of opportunity with this lack of founder know-how or trying to understand how to execute, whereas we're here with all this great, fantastic founder talent with not the biggest market opportunity. So often we find is that we have to go global, right? Very early, which is a good thing, And the another thing I found in ASEAN is that, especially in the developing ecosystems, is that, like, I love Australia, I'm from here, but we sometimes like just build apps and stuff and we're like, yeah, like saving the world with my app. They're like innovating out of need. It's because there was a drought that hit their farm and they can't eat. They have no food for whatever, or they're in a place where there's no energy. Like I was in Myanmar, and we were at a startup pitch day. It was the demo day, and I was like, oh great, it's so cool. And then the lights went out. Everybody had a torch. Everybody just got their torch out. I was like, okay, continue. I was like, this is a normal occurrence that the lights go out during a pitch day, and everyone has, I don't know if you know this, but you know how there's over 100% mobile penetration in the developing countries. It's not because everyone just loves their phones, because that's what my perception was like, oh, massive mobile market opportunity. Yeah, it's not that. It's because the internet's so crap. And they have to have mobile devices with multiple carriers because they don't know which one's going to be, going to be turned on in the area that they're in. That's why there's over 100% penetration. And I naively didn't know that. So that's, I guess, that thing of innovating out of need is something that I found that's quite different there. But lots of cross-pollination. I definitely see a lot of Aussies over there and a lot of, people from Southeast Asia coming here. So would love to see that connection happening. So I'm trying to facilitate that.
Absolutely. And so, like, in terms of the startups that you're looking, as you mentioned, in places like Philippines or Myanmar, as opposed to opportunities here, are you looking for different things? So, like, how do you compare between opportunities that you're seeing there versus opportunities that you're seeing?
I don't compare. It's different.
Okay.
You can't. Like, we have an Australian fund, which has, so we have the AFOF, so the Australian Fund of Funds, which is a master fund and beneath it sits 7 funds. So you have the Blue Chili Fund, Senior Yields, Accelerate, so all these different funds that sit beneath there, and that is one fund. So that's a regional, like a country fund. And then we have the Southeast Asia Fund. It's one fund. It does multiple countries, so 6 countries, but it's one fund because that is the opportunity. And then we have the China East Asia Fund, which is like China, Hong Kong, and so they're separate because they're different markets. So I don't try to compare across the regions. I see them as 3 unique market opportunities that we're just trying to capture like any other investor.
Sure. So I was, one of the things that I've kind of like looking into your background, I just realised that the Young Achievement Australia program started again, which is awesome. So two of the guys that are in the crowd today, Drew Corby, who runs the Pathways podcast, and Dustin Elliott, who runs the Y2 podcast. I was recently on their shows and talking about how big a role YA played in me getting into.
Oh my god!
I did YA.
You did YA?
I did YA, and so that's
I love it.
I had no idea what business was. Like, I didn't want to start a business at all. I wanted to play cricket professionally, but that was a completely different story. But having to do the YA program completely changed my outlook, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I think we were the last year or the second last year that it kind of ran. So glad to have it back. But again, for those people that aren't familiar about what it is, can you give a sort of brief summary of what the program is and what it does and how you can get involved?
I can. So Young Achievement Australia is really cool. So I actually am not an alumni, so I didn't do the program itself. What it is, it's like a 6-month startup boot camp, right, for university kids. And what you do is you get in a team of like 15 to 25 to try to simulate like a real company. You ideate, you come up with a product, you test it, you validate, you go out and raise capital for $2 a share, and you write shareholders, like little shareholder share certificates. Sell them to your parents, whoever you can, hock them to, get the capital, build your product, and then you go to market, sell, and then you return a profit or a dividend back to your shareholders, and then you can donate the rest, and then you liquidate and actually wind down the business. So it's meant to be a full life cycle of opportunity of actually running something. And it was like I was saying, like fail forward in a safe environment where you can try your hand at entrepreneurship and spark that that business person inside you. And I heard about it because my other co-founder Aaron Nunn, who's now our president, so he runs the not-for-profit now. He was like YA junkie. He did it like 1 year, and then he was like a mentor, and he was like a mentor trainer, and then it shut down in 2007 because he ran out of funding. It got too fat. It was not startup-y at all. Too many officers, too many like staff with executive assistants who have an assistant. Horrible, right? And so when I heard about it, I just had another Zoom moment where I was like, oh my god, dead IP issues. I love it. I want to get involved. So we restarted that not-for-profit, and then we were looking at how to like create a business model around it to make it last, not have that issue of dying again. So we looked at the biggest version of us, which is JAA, so Junior Achievement Worldwide. So YA has 120,000 alumni. Students go through the programs, including himself. Scott Farrakhan from ASEAN, Mick Lebrunskis, all of them went through it. JAA had 10 million students globally, 120 countries. So we were like, okay, that's a partnership we need to get. got them to jump on board, and we got the license, and now we are getting sponsorship from like FedEx, Bloomberg, through the parent company. So it's really all about trying to not just teach entrepreneurship skills. We now opened up to high school because of the partnership. It's budgeting, it's, you know, community awareness. How do you add value as an individual? It's about empowering the youth so they feel that they have the tools necessary to try and do something of value to make a change. So that's kind of the crux, you know, behind it.
Yeah, I mean, like you've been, you know, obviously part of the ecosystem for such a long time as a founder, and now as part of an investor.
I can't say I'm like young and anymore. It's such my wild card before.
What are some of the changes, and you've touched on this earlier, but what are some of the changes that you've seen from when you first got started, and what are some of the things that you would like to see us do moving forward?
Well, women, I have to talk about it. There was, when I first started, I was like the only, me and probably like one other person like at the startup events and stuff, and that was hard, I think, also on the investing side. So I don't know if you know, but less than 4% of like technical founders are female, and then even a smaller amount are sitting on boards, and then even a smaller percentage are actually investors. So I want to see more females just sort of playing in the space, and I think it's that whole notion of, you know, education, getting them early, and supporting each other as females. And obviously we've seen all the backlash that's happened, all the harassment and all and all that stuff, which is horrible. I actually know the binary guys, but it's just, you know, I think, you know, bringing things to the forefront is important, and having that conversation, even though sometimes I feel like it's sort of done to death. Like, I mean, I'm a female, massive female, like a feminist, really want to help other women try to get in the space, but I want the language to change from being victimized to empowerment. I just like love this notion of empowerment, and I think if more women get out there and think about, or like take a risk on themselves, because often it's that we don't, and like my own personal issues, it's like not having the confidence or not asking for what we deserve and not taking the step, or as Sheryl Sandberg says, leaning in. I think it's like a systemic change that needs to happen culturally, and any conversation is good, so I'll take the victimizing conversation for now, but I want it to move to more of an empowering message.
Yeah, is there any way that that you think that we can speed that along faster, or is that just a time thing? Like, what do you think we can do to help you know, bring that more as a forefront of discussion, specifically the empowerment side?
I think it's role models. I mean, like, that's how I've learned most of my things, is just looking at other people, looking around. So when you don't see your peers, if you don't see someone who looks like you, is your age, doing something that you want to do, it's very hard for you to imagine, or especially if you're lacking confidence. So I think having more role models out there. So I guess my message on your podcast is all the women out there who are sitting thinking that, hey, I want to take the next step, but I'm a bit scared. It's not for you. Get your ass up. It's for all the other women out there that you have to act as a role model for. So I think that's the key. It's getting more stories, getting that propagated, and getting that out there. Fantastic.
On that note, Vicky, thanks so much for your time and for sharing your insights today. For anyone that wants to find out more, get in touch, say hello, what's the best way for them to do that?
Don't email me because I'm really bad on email. Definitely social. So on my Twitter, so Vicki Lay _. Yes, I don't. Someone else took Vicki Lay, so I had to put underscore at the end. Instagram or LinkedIn. LinkedIn's pretty good too. It's a good format to get me on, but email, I just won't respond, I'll be honest.
Perfect. I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes. Vicky, once again, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I've been following you for a while. I think you've done a really awesome job with what you've done, and 50 in a year, that's one a week. So good job, and keep at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks for listening to episode 56 of the Startup Playbook Podcast. You can find the show notes of my interview with Vicky, along with a curated list of tools and resources for startup founders at startupplaybook.co. As always, you can join the conversation through our Twitter account. The handle is @PlaybookStartup. Next week, I'll be publishing my interview with Australia's new head of 500 startups and former managing director of Eventbrite in Australia, Rachel Newman. In the episode, we will be talking about the Australian startup ecosystem, how to approach global expansion, and the trends and lessons from a wide investment strategy. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at episode 57 next week.